There is a very specific, undeniable atmosphere that permeates a political administration when the facade of absolute control finally shatters. It does not happen quietly. It happens in a cacophony of contradictions, panicked policy reversals, and desperate attempts to manipulate a reality that has fundamentally slipped out of their grasp. Right now, inside the highest levels of the United States government, we are witnessing exactly that phenomenon. The commander-in-chief is completely cracking under the crushing, relentless pressure of a disastrous, unprovoked war of his own making. The administration has lost control of the narrative. They have lost control of the global economy. And most terrifyingly, they have lost control of the actual military conflict itself. To understand the sheer magnitude of this geopolitical meltdown, you have to look past the bluster and examine the actual tangible actions being taken by the Treasury Department. For months, the American public was sold a narrative of overwhelming strength. They were promised that maximum pressure campaigns and military strikes would bring adversaries to their knees. Yet, as the price of a barrel of crude oil violently spikes to 120, the bravado has entirely evaporated, replaced by a staggering display of capitulation. The administration has blinked. In an act of profound hypocrisy that defies fundamental military logic, the United States government is quietly moving to remove economic sanctions on Iranian oil. Let that reality sink in for a moment. American military personnel are currently engaged in a highly volatile, escalating conflict. The rhetoric flowing from the Oval Office portrays the adversary as an existential threat. And simultaneously, the Treasury Department is actively working to allow that exact same adversary to freely sell its most valuable commodity on the open market. The administration is essentially funding the very regime they are dropping bombs on, strictly because they are terrified of the political consequences of skyrocketing gas prices back home. We do not have to guess about this strategy. They are openly admitting it on television. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stood before cameras and casually outlined what he called a break-the-glass emergency plan. He confessed that the administration had already completely unsanctioned Russian oil, allowing Vladimir Putin to flood the market with 130 million barrels. And now, in a state of absolute economic desperation, Bessent announced that the United States may unsanction the Iranian oil currently floating on the water. He estimated that volume to be roughly 140 million barrels. The Treasury Secretary attempted to spin this staggering surrender as a brilliant tactical maneuver. He claimed that the administration would, in essence, use Iranian barrels against the Iranians to artificially suppress domestic fuel prices for the next 10 to 14 days. It is a stunning admission of failure. The administration initiated a massive conflict without any coherent strategy to secure global energy markets. And their only solution to the resulting chaos is to reward the very nations they claim to be fighting. They are handing their enemies a massive financial windfall just to survive a bad 2-week news cycle. And the adversary knows exactly how desperate Washington has become. They are not retreating. They are actively exploiting the weakness. The Iranian regime has essentially seized operational dominance over the most critical maritime choke point on the planet. They have established what they are calling an approved shipping corridor directly through the Strait of Hormuz. This is not a theoretical exercise. The regime is selectively allowing specific commercial vessels to pass through their territorial waters, but only after securing prior approval and exacting a massive financial toll. According to maritime intelligence monitors, at least one commercial tanker recently paid a reported $2 million directly for safe transit. The nation the United States is currently fighting has transformed the world's most vital energy artery into a highly lucrative mafia protection racket. They are actively generating millions of dollars in revenue from the chaos, further entrenching their control over the waterway while the American commander-in-chief scrambles to lift their oil sanctions. While the administration hemorrhages leverage overseas, they are actively demanding an unprecedented financial blank check from the American taxpayer at home. This morning, the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, held a press conference to formally request an emergency defense supplemental package. The price tag attached to this demand is a staggering $200 billion. The justification provided for this astronomical sum was chilling in its flippancy. Hegseth stood at the podium and declared that the military is rapidly running out of munitions and weapons. His exact phrasing delivered to the citizens who will foot this massive bill was that it takes money to kill bad guys and that the Pentagon needs this cash to ensure ammunition stockpiles are refilled above and beyond. It requires a profound level of historical amnesia to ignore the deep, insulting irony of this demand. For years, the American public was subjected to endless political lectures about the necessity of fiscal austerity when proposals were introduced to invest $30 billion into the healthcare system, a move that would have prevented 20 million working-class citizens from seeing their medical premiums violently double. Those initiatives were viciously struck down. Politicians claimed the nation simply could not afford to keep its own citizens healthy. They argued that such spending would irreparably bankrupt the republic. Yet today, the administration is demanding $200 billion to rapidly restock explosive munitions for a war of choice. And they expect the funds to be authorized without a whisper of dissent. Heggs casually noted that the $200 billion figure was flexible, adding give or take a few billion, as if he were negotiating the price of office furniture rather than the wealth of a nation. This cavalier attitude toward public money is occurring at the exact moment the United States national debt has crossed the terrifying threshold of $39 trillion. Just months ago in October, that figure sat at $37 trillion. The current regime, enabled by compliant political allies, is actively adding roughly $1 trillion to the national debt every 60 days. They are mortgaging the future of the country to finance a rapidly escalating disaster while domestic priorities are left to rot. And what exactly is this massive expenditure buying the American public? It is purchasing the systematic long-term destruction of the global supply chain. The true scale of the physical devastation caused by this conflict is only just beginning to be understood. Recently, the United States and Israel authorized a joint military strike against the South Pars energy facility inside Iran. It was a provocative attack aimed at crippling critical infrastructure. The Iranian response was immediate, devastating, and perfectly targeted to inflict maximum economic pain on the West. Iran launched retaliatory strikes directly into northern Qatar, explicitly targeting the Ras Laffan industrial city. Qatar is a sovereign nation and a vital American ally, but it is also the beating heart of the global liquefied natural gas industry. According to the CEO of Qatar Energy, the Iranian bombardment severely damaged facilities that are solely responsible for producing 17% of Qatar's entire export capacity. The global implications of that strike are apocalyptic. In a single 24-hour period of retaliatory violence, roughly 3 to 5% of the entire planetary capacity for liquefied natural gas was completely wiped off the map. This is not a minor disruption that can be patched with a temporary spending bill. The Qatari government has explicitly stated that it will take a minimum of 2 to 3 full years to completely repair the incinerated infrastructure. Faced with the catastrophic success of the Iranian retaliation, the President of the United States did what he always does when confronted with the consequences of his own actions. He immediately retreated into denial and attempted to throw his closest allies directly under the bus. Donald Trump rapidly deployed a statement claiming that the United States knew absolutely nothing about the initial strike on the South Pars gas field, despite mountains of credible military reporting confirming that the operation was a joint authorization. The president attempted to pin the entire disaster squarely on Benjamin Netanyahu. He claimed that Israel had violently lashed out in anger and that Washington was completely blind to the operation. It was a pathetic, transparent attempt to distance himself from a tactical blunder, showcasing a commander-in-chief who is terrified to own the military orders he himself sets into motion. The fallout from the Roslaffen destruction is already cascading through the global economy in ways that will inevitably impact everyday life. Airlines are currently receiving stark warnings to expect massive, unavoidable flight cancellations. Severe jet fuel rationing is scheduled to begin next month, specifically due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the destruction of regional refineries. Long-haul international flights are particularly vulnerable as carriers are suddenly realizing they cannot physically secure the massive amounts of fuel required to complete return journeys. But the crisis extends far beyond commercial aviation and gasoline prices. The Middle East is a foundational pillar for the global production of agricultural fertilizers. It is a massive producer of helium, which is critical for medical imaging technology and advanced manufacturing. These are the invisible highly complex supply chains that maintain the fragile equilibrium of modern civilization. We take them entirely for granted until they are violently disrupted. Right now, those critical networks are being systematically dismantled, and the ripple effects will soon manifest in exploding food prices and severe shortages across multiple sectors. In the midst of this cascading global nightmare, with energy markets fracturing, the military begging for a bailout, and allies taking direct missile fire, one would expect the leader of the free world to project an aura of intense, unwavering focus. You would expect the Oval Office to be operating with a sharp, disciplined urgency. Instead, the president is demonstrating a psychological disconnect so profound it borders on the surreal. While the Middle East actively burned this morning, Donald Trump logged onto social media to broadcast his thoughts to the world. He did not issue a steadying message to the American public. He did not offer strategic clarity. He posted an advertisement about a pair of rare gold-colored Trump-branded sneakers being listed for $180,000 at a SneakerCon event located in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. The sheer deranged absurdity of that message cannot be overstated. Riyadh is currently a war zone. The city has been the target of direct drone strikes targeting its own vital energy facilities. No one is hosting a luxury sneaker convention in a city bracing for the next wave of aerial bombardment. But the post reveals the deeply transactional, self-obsessed lens through which the president views global affairs. For years, his family built a massive financial architecture across the Gulf states. They cultivated deep, highly lucrative relationships with sovereign wealth funds. Foreign governments and private entities poured billions of dollars into real estate ventures, private equity firms, and luxury branding deals directly associated with the president's inner circle. Those investors handed over vast fortunes, operating under the unspoken assumption that they were purchasing American political stability, access, and ultimate protection. Now the region is functionally collapsing. International investment is completely frozen. Nobody is booking flights to Doha, Abu Dhabi, or Dubai to close business deals. Behind the scenes, corporate lawyers are working around the clock to invoke force majeure clauses, the emergency legal mechanisms that allow entities to legally abandon massive financial contracts due to unforeseeable catastrophic events like regional warfare, the massive pipeline of Middle Eastern capital that typically flows into American technology startups, and domestic private equity is evaporating overnight. The global investors who believed they had purchased a shield are discovering that they actually financed their own destabilization. And yet the president remains entirely fixated on the secondary resale market for his branded footwear. A few hours later, he returned to social media to complain bitterly about windmills. He shared a message from an ally complaining about driving from Los Angeles to Palm Springs and seeing junk windmills that supposedly act as bird killers and suck the taxpayers dry. It is the behavior of a man who has completely retreated into an alternate reality. The world is teetering on the edge of a severe energy crisis. Fuel rationing is imminent. Allied refineries are literal smoking craters, and the commander-in-chief is hyper-focusing on the aesthetic displeasure of renewable energy turbines in the California desert. He is mentally entirely absent from the crisis he created. Because the leader is absent, his subordinates are forced to step into the void and defend the increasingly indefensible reality. This inevitably leads to moments of spectacular, humiliating gaslighting. During his press conference, Defense Secretary Hegst decided that the true villains of this conflict were not the hostile forces dismantling global trade, but rather the journalists reporting on it and the allies suffering from it. Hegst stood before the cameras and delivered a deeply cynical monologue. He proclaimed that the world, the ungrateful allies in Europe, and specifically the domestic press corps, should be looking at the president and saying a collective thank you. He accused the media of suffering from a derangement syndrome, claiming they will stop at nothing to downplay progress and amplify costs. He looked past the reporters in the room, claiming he was speaking directly to the good, decent, God-fearing, tax-paying patriots of America. He explicitly told the public that any suggestion the nation is spinning toward an endless abyss or a forever war is entirely false. But rhetoric cannot alter physical reality. While Hegst angrily demanded gratitude and painted a picture of absolute military supremacy, the actual brass at the Pentagon were simultaneously destroying his narrative. The administration has repeatedly forcefully claimed that they have entirely degraded the enemy's capabilities. They insisted that Iran possessed no functional ballistic missiles remaining. Yet, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Keane, was forced to publicly admit the exact opposite. When pressed on why hostile drones and ballistic missiles were continually successfully striking neighboring Arab nations, General Keane did not spin. He admitted plainly that the enemy came into this fight with a massive arsenal of weapons. He confirmed that they still retain highly functional medium-range and short-range ballistic missile capabilities, and that the United States military is still actively hunting them down. The visual evidence supports the general, not the politicians. The footage of massive liquefied natural gas facilities burning in Qatar is not a digital fabrication. The strikes in Riyadh are not artificial intelligence. The fires in Bahrain are real. You cannot demand that the public express gratitude for a total victory while your own top general admits the enemy's missile silos remain fully operational and the chaos is not limited to infrastructure. The human cost is escalating and the rules of engagement are degrading rapidly. In southern Lebanon, verified video emerged showing an Israeli military strike directly targeting a British journalist named Steve Sweeney. Sweeney and his camera crew, who had been actively reporting on the systematic targeting of the press in the surrounding areas, were caught in the blast. While he survived the ordeal, the incident served as a horrifying reminder of the lawlessness permeating the entire region. While the defense secretary verbally attacks the media from the safety of a Washington podium, Allied forces are utilizing explosive ordinances against reporters. Documenting the ground truth. The administration's inability to maintain a coherent narrative was further exposed during a disastrous congressional hearing involving the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Gabbard was called to testify before the House of Representatives, where she faced a brutal, meticulously prepared line of questioning from Democratic Congressman Jimmy Gomez. Gomez did not rely on theatrics. He simply used Gabbard's own past words against her. He reminded the chamber that just last year, Gabbard had testified under oath that Iran was not actively building a nuclear weapon. Gomez asked a remarkably straightforward question. Do you stand by that statement, yes or no? Rather than defending her previous intelligence assessment, the Director of National Intelligence completely crumbled. She frantically tried to dodge the inquiry, claiming that context matters, and repeatedly attempting to reclaim her time to avoid providing a definitive answer. Congressman Gomez pressed the issue, pointing out that President Trump had previously gone on the record calling her past testimony factually wrong. He cornered her with the ultimate dilemma. Was she lying then? Or is she lying now? Stripped of any coherent defense, Gabbard retreated to a hollow robotic talking point, stating only that she stands by the intelligence community's complete assessment. It was the sound of a high-ranking official caught entirely in the gears of an administration that requires constant historical revisionism to survive. When you synthesize all of these desperate data points, a terrifying mosaic emerges. The leadership structure of the United States is currently functioning as an engine of pure cognitive dissonance. They are begging the taxpayers for $200 billion to fight an enemy while simultaneously working to unsanction that enemy's oil to save their own political polling numbers. They launch devastating attacks on critical global infrastructure and then cower behind their allies to avoid the geopolitical blowback. They watch as the global energy supply chain fractures, bringing the world to the brink of a massive inflationary crisis. And their response is to post advertisements for luxury sneakers and complain about the aesthetics of wind turbines. They demand absolute gratitude from the public for preventing a forever war while actively participating in a conflict that has no definable exit strategy, no coherent objective, and no end in sight. But perhaps the most insulting aspect of this entire collapse is the message the administration is currently sending to the American working class as citizens watch their cost of living threaten to skyrocket due to shattered supply chains and exploding oil prices. The vice presidential candidate, JD Vance, offered a remarkably callous perspective. Vance's official response to the economic anxiety gripping the nation was to essentially tell the public to stop complaining. He argued that the United States has pursued an energy dominance agenda and therefore Americans should realize that other nations have it significantly worse. He specifically targeted overseas allies, claiming that because they invested in what he deemed green energy scams, they are feeling the financial pain far more acutely than anyone in the domestic market. That is the ultimate distillation of this administration's empathy. As the national debt spirals toward $40 trillion, as $200 billion is funneled to defense contractors, and as the price of basic necessities threatens to break the back of the middle class, the official White House stance is that you should simply be grateful you are not freezing in Europe. They demand loyalty. They demand money. They demand that you reject the reality you can see with your own eyes. But what they cannot demand and what they have entirely lost is control. The cracks in the foundation, are no longer hidden. They are widening by the hour, and the entire structure is beginning to inevitably catastrophically give